They tell you to stay silent and let karma do the work. Let the universe punish the liar. Let betrayal rot on its own. Let time reveal the truth. Sounds peaceful, doesn't it? But here's what they won't say out loud. Karma is not your bodyguard. And silence, when used wrong, isn't strength. It's self-abandonment. Marcus Aurelius didn't stay silent waiting for justice. Epictetus didn't teach us to vanish and hope for peace. And Carl Jung didn't spend his life mapping the human shadow just so we could hide from it. Real strength isn't silence for karma's sake. It's silence as an act of conscious power. After you've faced your pain, stared down your ego, and chosen to respond with clarity, not chaos. In this video, we're not just going to copy a trend. We'll break down 7 situations when silence isn't avoidance. It's sovereignty. Not passivity, but presence. Not faith in karma, but trust in yourself. Of goat. You see, the danger with silence is that it looks like strength from the outside even when, inside, you're quietly collapsing. Stoicism isn't about pretending things don't hurt. Jung didn't write about the shadow to help us disappear from conflict. And peace isn't found in withdrawal. It's found in choosing what and who is worth your energy. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from a confrontation proud that you stayed calm, only to spend hours replaying what you should have said? You call it choosing peace. But deep down, you feel hollow, not strong, just unheard. That's not Stoicism. That's self-erasure. True Stoicism, like Jung's shadow work, begins with radical self-honesty. You face the fire. You notice the pull to explode. You acknowledge the pain, the need to be understood, defended, vindicated. And then you ask the hardest question of all. Is reacting to this really worth giving away my peace? Because here's the thing. Sometimes silence is strength, but sometimes it's self-betrayal wrapped in a spiritual quote. Real silence is not what you use to avoid pain. It's what you choose once you've understood the pain and decided not to let it lead you. There is a difference between holding your ground and running from the battlefield without ever picking up your sword. This video is not about silence as a spiritual performance. It's about silence as command after you've done the inner work to stand still and unshakable. And to do that, you need to know when silence serves you and when it steals your voice. Let's get into the 7 situations where silence is not weakness, but sovereignty. And the first one? It's the one we've all lived through and most of us still haven't healed from. The first situation where silence becomes your shield is when someone spreads lies about you. Not just rumors. Lies designed to destroy your credibility, your peace, your name. And the worst part? You didn't see it coming. Let me introduce you to a man named Ryan. He's a mid-level project manager at a tech firm in Seattle, dependable, skilled, and respected for staying out of office drama. Ryan isn't the loudest in the room, but he's the guy everyone counts on when deadlines get tight and tensions run high. And that was enough to make someone jealous. It started small, little jabs behind his back. Subtle questions like, "Have you noticed Ryan's been acting strange lately?" Then came the bigger accusations, whispered doubts about his ethics, fabricated mistakes pinned to his name. At first, Ryan thought it would blow over, that his work would speak for itself. But soon, colleagues stopped making eye contact. Meetings felt colder. One morning, he walked into the office and felt something shift, like his presence was no longer neutral. It was suspicious. His first instinct? Defend himself. Bring receipts. Schedule a meeting with HR. Demand transparency. Clear his name. And honestly, who would blame him? Because when someone lies about you, something primal ignites. The need to be seen. the ache for justice, the fury of being misrepresented. But here's the Stoic truth. Not every attack deserves your full attention, and not every lie needs a courtroom. Ryan sat with the fire. He didn't deny it. He didn't suppress it. He just didn't let it choose his next move. Instead of launching a campaign to clear his name, he focused on what he could control. His work, his presence, his frame. He became radically consistent, showed up early, delivered excellence, spoke less, observed more. Weeks passed. Then one day, the real story unraveled. The person who started the lies, exposed for a pattern of manipulation not just with Ryan but others. The people who once doubted him began to reconnect. Not because he argued his way back into favor, but because truth, like gravity, doesn't need to scream. It just pulls everything back into place. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." He never added, "And if someone lies about you, abandon your peace to prove them wrong." Because the Stoic doesn't chase rumors. He stays anchored in character. And eventually, character outlasts performance. Carl Jung would have seen this differently too. He believed the shadow, the denied parts of ourselves, crave chaos. When you react to the liar, you don't just protect your ego, you often become the very thing you're defending against. You mirror their shadow, and now you're part of the performance. But silence, real, grounded silence, breaks the mirror. It says, "You don't get to decide my worth with words. You don't get to make me abandon my peace for your projection. You can lie, but I won't lend you my energy." That's not passivity. That's self-possession. So if you ever find yourself the target of a lie, pause. Ask, am I defending truth or just reacting to fear? And if your truth is solid, let your life be the answer. Let your actions be the story. And let your silence be the reminder. You are not here to prove your innocence. You are here to live it. The second situation where silence becomes a weapon is when betrayal doesn't come from your enemies, but from someone you trusted most. There was a woman named Emily. She was a high school counselor in Colorado, calm, thoughtful, the kind of person who carried everyone else's weight without ever complaining. She had a best friend for over 10 years. They weren't just close, they were each other's second home. College roommates, maid of honor, late-night crisis calls, career advice over wine. It was the kind of friendship people envy, until it wasn't. It started with distance. Plans cancelled without reason. Messages left on read. Then came the whispers, Emily's personal fears, shared in confidence, now echoing through other people's mouths. Her dreams dismissed, her trust twisted, and the deepest cut, discovering that this friend had been quietly undermining her behind her back. Why? Jealousy, insecurity, that quiet resentment that builds when someone grows and you don't. Emily's first instinct was the same as anyone's: confrontation. She wanted to ask, why? She wanted to demand, how could you? She wanted the friend to feel what she felt. But here's a brutal truth from Jungian psychology. The person who betrays you has already rewritten the story in their head, and in that version, you're the villain. So if you walk into that moment seeking understanding, what you'll find instead is justification. And the more you ask for empathy, the more you bleed for someone who's already emotionally gone. Emily didn't scream. She didn't explode. She didn't write a bitter post or send a final message full of closure that would never be received. She just stepped away. Quietly. Completely. Her silence wasn't cold. It was clean. It wasn't a performance. It was protection. Because some people don't deserve your words. They deserve the space left behind when you stop explaining yourself. The friend waited for drama. She expected backlash. But all she got was absence. And that absence? It echoed louder than any confrontation ever could. Because when someone betrays you, what they really want is your energy. They want your confusion, your hurt, your desperate attempt to restore what they already threw away. That proves they still matter. But when you give them nothing, they don't just lose access to your voice, they lose access to your soul. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Betrayal is that friction. It stings, but it reveals. It shows you what's real and what was only convenient. Carl Jung would call it shadow exposure. The betrayal activates the part of you that wants revenge and forces you to choose. Do I become the darkness that wounded me, or do I rise above it? Emily didn't pretend she wasn't angry. She processed it privately, but she didn't let it guide her. Because she realized some endings don't need to be loud to be final. So what do you do when someone you love turns against you? First, accept who they've become, not who you wish they were. That version is gone. Second, don't argue your worth to someone who erased it to feel taller. Let them live with that decision. Third, walk away with silence, not spite. Because silence creates space, and space creates clarity. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your peace. And if they ever regret what they lost, let that regret echo in the silence you left behind. The third situation where silence is your sharpest weapon is when someone tries to provoke you with an insult, especially in public. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Kevin. He worked as a senior operations analyst at a logistics company in Chicago. Quiet, competent, respected the kind of man who never bragged, never played office politics, and always got the job done. One Friday afternoon, after years of consistency, Kevin finally got promoted. It wasn't flashy, just a quiet announcement during a team meeting. He didn't expect applause, but he didn't expect the jab either. As the room settled, a colleague across the table smirked and said just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, I guess they're giving promotions to anyone these days." The room paused. All eyes turned to Kevin. The moment was thick, waiting to see if he'd flinch, fire back, break his frame. But Kevin didn't say a word. He smiled, not sarcastically, but with a kind of steady self-control. Then he turned back to the agenda. That was it. No retort, no tension, just composure. And that silence, it won the room. Because here's what most people miss. Insults aren't about truth. They're about power. The one who insults you, especially in public, isn't seeking dialogue. They're staging a performance. And your reaction is their spotlight. The Stoics understood this game deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Read that again slowly. Not reacting isn't surrender, it's sovereignty. Carl Jung would add this, "An insult that cuts you isn't just about the other person, it touches something in you. Your ego, your unhealed wound, your inner critic that whispers, maybe they're right." That's what makes the insult stick. That's what makes you want to defend, prove, argue. But here's the truth. You don't need to win the argument. You just need to not enter it. When Kevin stayed calm, he didn't just silence his critic, he silenced theirs. Because nothing frustrates an insulter more than being ignored. They want to see you rattle. They want proof that they can control you, that their words can bend your dignity. But silence says, "I don't need your validation, and I don't fear your judgment." That is psychological dominance, not over them, but over yourself. So what do you do when someone insults you? First, recognize what they're fishing for. It's not truth, it's your reaction. Don't hand it over. Second, Let your stillness speak. When your tone stays calm, your face relaxed, your posture grounded, you send a message louder than any comeback. You don't move me. Third, hold your frame. Self-respect doesn't explain. Confidence doesn't chase correction. The person who stands firm in silence forces the attacker to stand alone. And if others are watching, let them. Because the strongest man in the room isn't the loudest. He's the one everyone tries to provoke, and no one can move. So next time someone jabs at your worth, your work, your story, don't perform. Don't prove. Just pause. Because silence, when born from mastery, isn't empty. It's armor. The fourth situation where silence becomes your lifeline is when someone weaponizes vulnerability. Not to connect, not to heal, but to control. There was a woman named Linda. She was a team leader at a mid-sized marketing firm, sharp, logical, respected for her fairness. The kind of leader who brought receipts to meetings, listened more than she spoke, and gave people the benefit of the doubt. But there was one co-worker, let's call her Rachel, who twisted every interaction into a performance. If she missed a deadline, it was because she wasn't being supported. If she was held accountable, she'd cry. If someone challenged her, she'd act like she was being attacked. And every time Linda tried to respond calmly, rationally, with facts, she found herself portrayed as the aggressor. Not because she was wrong, but because Rachel had mastered one thing: emotional inversion. This is the most dangerous kind of manipulation. It doesn't confront you. It converts you from someone with boundaries into someone who feels guilty for having any at all. And the more Linda explained herself, the worse it got. Her logic became cold. Her facts became insensitive. Her boundaries became bullying. Until one day, she stopped. She stopped trying to clarify. She stopped trying to be the bigger person. She stopped performing in someone else's emotional theater. Her silence was not absence. It was clarity. Because here's what Stoic wisdom and Jungian psychology both understand. Some people don't want resolution. They want attention. They don't argue to find truth. They cry to silence truth. Epictetus said, "To complain is always non-productive and never appropriate." But here's the real insight. The chronic victim doesn't complain for change. They complain for control. And when you respond, when you defend, explain, over-clarify, you validate their entire script. Carl Jung would call this shadow projection. The victim projects their chaos onto you, then accuses you of creating it. They cannot confront their own self-deception, so they recruit you as the villain in their story. But silence? Silence is the only thing that breaks the script. Because silence doesn't give them anything to spin, no words to twist, no energy to feed on. That's what Linda chose. Stillness, grounded detachment. She didn't fight. She didn't justify. She just watched and waited. And over time, the pattern exposed itself. People started noticing the same script replayed over and over with different villains. And one by one, the audience stopped clapping. So what do you do when someone plays the victim to manipulate you? First, recognize the performance. This isn't about what you said. It's about what they need the story to be. Second, stay emotionally detached. Observe, don't absorb. If you let their script pull you in, you become the actor they cast even if you never auditioned. Third, let repetition do the work. Patterns don't lie. Eventually, even the best performances unravel, but only if you stop giving them lines to work with. At the end of the day, you don't owe clarity to someone who profits from confusion. Let them twist. Let them cry. Let them build their drama. And then, let your silence close the curtain. The fifth situation where silence becomes necessary is when your presence is taken for granted. I once knew a man named Brian. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, but he was consistent, painfully so. He was the kind of friend who remembered birthdays, showed up to help you move, checked in just to make sure you were okay. He never asked for credit, never made people feel like they owed him anything. He just gave because that's who he was. But over time, something shifted. Brian started to notice that when he stopped calling, the silence stretched. When he didn't text first, days went by without a word. And when he did reach out, the replies felt shallow, like he was an afterthought, not a priority. At first, he questioned himself. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But deep down, he knew he wasn't being loved. He was being used. Not out of cruelty, but out of comfort. Because when you're always available, people stop seeing you. Not because you don't matter, but because they assume you'll always be there. And that's when Brian made a quiet decision. He didn't post about it. He didn't start arguments. He didn't send angry texts demanding effort or explanations. He just stopped. He stopped overextending. He stopped initiating. He let the silence speak. And the result? Some people noticed. Some people didn't. But that silence did something profound. It revealed the truth. Because silence chosen, intentional silence isn't absence. It's a mirror. Those who valued him came closer. Those who didn't drifted further or vanished entirely. It hurt, yes, but it also healed. Because Brian didn't lose relationships. He lost the illusion of reciprocity, and in that space, he reclaimed something more valuable, his self-respect. Seneca once wrote, "Time discovers truth." And Carl Jung would agree, saying that when you silence the noise of other people's needs, you start to hear the voice of your neglected self. Brian didn't become bitter. He didn't turn cold. He just learned the most radical form of self-care, non-chasing. So, what do you do when your worth is ignored? First, stop chasing clarity from those who enjoy your confusion. If they can't see your value when you're present, let them feel it when you're gone. Second, don't explain your withdrawal. Let the silence ask the questions you no longer have to. Third, observe. Those who matter will notice the shift, and they'll move toward you, not away. Because love without effort isn't love. And connection without mutuality isn't connection. It's convenience disguised as care. At the end of the day, you don't prove your worth by effort. You prove it by distance. And those who truly deserve your energy, they will feel the silence. Those who don't were never really there in the first place. The sixth situation where silence becomes not just strategy but survival is when someone keeps trying to provoke you on purpose. There was a man named Eric. He worked in client services at a fast-paced tech company. Calm, structured, emotionally steady, the kind of man who made order feel natural. But in every workplace, there's someone who feeds on disruption. Eric had a co-worker who never attacked directly. He used sarcasm like a scalpel, jokes that sounded harmless until you realized the room had gone quiet to hear them land. Comments that could be denied, but never unheard. In meetings, this person would throw out lines like, "Some of us aren't built for high pressure, right, Eric?" Or, "Guess we all have different speeds, some fast, some very careful." At first, Eric tried to take the high road. He responded with logic. He clarified. He even tried to talk it out one-on-one, hoping to clear the air. But he quickly realized this wasn't miscommunication. It was strategy. Because provocation isn't about misunderstanding. It's about control. And your reaction? That's the prize. The more Eric responded, the more fuel he gave. The more composed he tried to stay, the more precise the jabs became. It was a performance, and Eric had been cast in the role of the one who breaks. Until one day, he chose not to play. During a team meeting, when another passive-aggressive comment came his way, Eric didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He didn't offer a retort, a sigh, or even a smirk. He simply looked calmly, then turned back to the agenda. That silence? It was deafening, because for someone addicted to reaction, stillness is starvation. It strips them of the script. It leaves them alone on stage. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And Carl Jung would agree. Provocation reveals your unresolved pain. They poke where they sense your ego twitch, where your identity still depends on being seen, defended, or validated. But when you become immune to those triggers, you become untouchable. Eric didn't win a fight that day. He ended a cycle. Because silence isn't the absence of courage, it's the presence of mastery. So how do you deal with someone who pokes just to get a rise out of you? First, name the pattern in your mind. It's not a joke. It's bait. Don't take it. Second, hold your emotional frame. No shifts in tone, no visible reactions. Let your stillness be your stance. Third, let your calmness echo louder than their chaos. Because manipulators rely on noise and silence, silence is the one thing they can't control. At the end of the day, not every battle deserves your fire. Some don't even deserve a spark. And silence, when it comes from clarity, doesn't just protect your peace. It becomes the boundary no one can breach. The seventh situation where silence isn't revenge but wisdom is when someone finally realizes what they lost after it's already too late. There was a woman named Megan. She had been in a relationship for nearly 5 years, a relationship where she gave more than she received, showed up more than she was met, and stayed long after her needs stopped being noticed. At first, it was little things. Conversations that used to feel alive now felt one-sided. Questions about her day were replaced with distractions. Effort faded not in a dramatic collapse, but in the slow erosion of presence. Still, Megan stayed. She believed in loyalty. She kept giving, hoping love would circle back, that consistency would be enough. But one day, while sitting across from him at dinner, telling a story he wasn't listening to, she felt it, the absence of herself. She was still there physically, but emotionally, she'd been gone for a while. And he hadn't noticed. That night, she made a quiet decision. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't demand he change. She left with silence. No final argument. No, you'll regret this. Just an empty chair and the sound of the door closing behind her. At first, he brushed it off. He assumed she'd come back. She always did. But this time, days became weeks. Weeks turned into months. And the echo of her absence grew louder than any word she could have said. He called. He apologized. He promised change. But Megan, she had already healed in the space her silence gave her. Because here's the truth. If someone only values you after you leave, they never truly valued you while you were there. Stoicism teaches that peace doesn't come from others understanding you. It comes from no longer needing them to. And Carl Jung would say, self-mastery means knowing when to close a chapter, not because the story is over, but because it's hurting who you are becoming. Megan didn't leave to punish him. She left to reclaim herself. And when he finally noticed what he lost, it wasn't her voice that answered. It was her silence. And that silence was final. So, what do you do when someone regrets losing you? First, don't give them an easy way back. Your absence has meaning. Let it stay visible. Second, resist the urge to explain. Closure is not your job. especially when they ignored the chances to understand you before. Third, stand firm in your silence. Not out of pride, not out of spite, but out of respect for the version of you who stayed too long and the version who finally walked away. Because when someone wastes access to your presence, they don't deserve the privilege of your return. And that's the essence of real strength. You don't yell to be heard. You don't fight to be seen. You simply remove yourself and let your silence do what their attention never could. Let it speak. The seventh situation where silence isn't revenge but wisdom is when someone finally realizes what they lost after it's already too late. There was a woman named Megan. She had been in a relationship for nearly 5 years, a relationship where she gave more than she received, showed up more than she was met, and stayed long after her needs stopped being noticed. At first, it was little things. Conversations that used to feel alive now felt one-sided. Questions about her day were replaced with distractions. Effort faded not in a dramatic collapse, but in the slow erosion of presence. Still, Megan stayed. She believed in loyalty. She kept giving, hoping love would circle back, that consistency would be enough. But one day, while sitting across from him at dinner, telling a story he wasn't listening to, she felt it. The absence of herself. She was still there physically, but emotionally, she'd been gone for a while. And he hadn't noticed. That night, she made a quiet decision. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't demand he change. She left with silence. No final argument. No, you'll regret this. Just an empty chair and the sound of the door closing behind her. At first, he brushed it off. He assumed she'd come back. She always did. But this time, days became weeks. Weeks turned into months. And the echo of her absence grew louder than any word she could have said. He called. He apologized. He promised change. But Megan, she had already healed in the space her silence gave her. Because here's the truth. If someone only values you after you leave, they never truly valued you while you were there. Stoicism teaches that peace doesn't come from others understanding you. It comes from no longer needing them to. And Carl Jung would say, self-mastery means knowing when to close a chapter, not because the story is over, but because it's hurting who you are becoming. Megan didn't leave to punish him. She left to reclaim herself. And when he finally noticed what he lost, it wasn't her voice that answered. It was her silence. And that silence was final. So, what do you do when someone regrets losing you? First, don't give them an easy way back. Your absence has meaning. Let it stay visible. Second, resist the urge to explain. Closure is not your job, especially when they ignored the chances to understand you before. Third, stand firm in your silence. Not out of pride, not out of spite, but out of respect for the version of you who stayed too long and the version who finally walked away. Because when someone wastes access to your presence, they don't deserve the privilege of your return. And that's the essence of real strength. You don't yell to be heard. You don't fight to be seen. You simply remove yourself and let your silence do what their attention never could. Let it speak.